So, what the hell was that? Hey there guys, and welcome back to Dino Reacts. So today we are looking at Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. So guys, this movie, it was much different than all the Fridays that came before it, particularly because it was not based in Camp Crystal Lake. I did like that about the movie. I thought it was really inventive and a creative way just to bring Jason out of Crystal Lake. Instead, he goes to New York City, in Manhattan in particular. Now, unfortunately, although that is a very good idea for the movie, they don't quite pull it off in the way I wanted them to pull it off. Instead, the movie, it's a little bit messy, it's a bit all over the place, and there are definitely things that are absolute batshit bonkers about this movie. Because I am going to give you my positives and my negatives for this movie. If I'm honest, there are a lot more negatives than positives. I wasn't a huge fan of this movie. I remember when I was young, I used to watch it a lot and I absolutely loved it. Looking at it today, there are a lot of faults I've seen with it, so we'll get into them. But first, the positives. So right off the bat, guys, it's in the title, Jason Takes Manhattan. I did love that aspect of the movie. Even before the movie came out, there was huge promotion, even around New York City, for Jason coming to their city. One in particular was Jason was in a lot of interviews, so he was in talk show interviews, which I thought was really cool. Now, unfortunately, Jason can't really talk in those interviews, so they're not the most entertaining in the world, but they were a great idea just to promote the movie. I do also think the scenes that Jason is in New York work extremely well. If they had done the whole movie there, yes, it would have been absolutely brilliant. But unfortunately, with production, etc., they couldn't exactly do that. So instead, we only get the last third of the movie in New York City. I also like the intro to this movie, so it is in Camp Crystal Lake for maybe the first 5-10 minutes of the movie. Unlike previous movies, we don't get a huge intro showing all the movies that came before it. Instead, we get two students from Crystal Lake High School who are graduating the next day, and one of them pretty much just, explains who Jason Voorhees is, what he's done, and why people are afraid of Crystal Lake. Now, I will say when I was watching the movie, I did find it a little bit odd that one of the teenagers didn't really know what happened in Crystal Lake. That was a little bit silly to me, but still, it was a nice way just to introduce Jason and introduce it to Crystal Lake again in a different way compared to other movies. As well as that, they do explain how Jason comes back this time. They pretty much drop an anchor down to the bottom of the ocean, which of course gets caught by lightning, and Jason comes back one more time. After that, we're introduced to the main cast of teenagers. So again, they are graduates of the local high school in Crystal Lake, and they're going on a cruise ship to New York City. One thing I did notice with the teenagers in this movie, and even the aesthetic of the whole movie, it does look very much like the late 80s. So the movie came out in 1989, and you can tell that immediately. For me, it looks a lot more like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie than it does a Friday movie. Now, I don't know, is that because when Friday the 13th Part 7 came out, that I know Nightmare 4 actually beat that overall in the box office, and if they were maybe just taking some ideas from that. There's a lot more, rock music, you got the big hair, it does have that feel of a nightmare movie, but once Jason comes in, you can clearly tell you're back in Friday the 13th. Teenagers in this movie are also quite likeable. What I liked about them was they are all completely different. They have much different personality traits. It is meant to be a class in high school, so you get the jocks, you get the mean girls, you get the main final girl, who again is kind of like a good girl, but she has a past with Jason, which we've seen before. Unfortunately, you don't get to spend a lot of time with most of them. So a lot of the teenagers are kind of there just for a body count, which for me, I don't mind, because there are so many teenagers in this movie that you don't really care about that after a while. I will also say, as much as I was disappointed that the whole movie isn't in New York City, even the parts on the ship were actually quite fun. If they had marketed the movie, and not talked about New York City, I think that would have been a much better payoff. If you'd seen the whole movie on the ship and then the last act of it in New York City, it would have been a great twist. It would have been a good ending to the movie, rather than just waiting for them to get to New York City throughout the entire run. Final girl in this movie, Rennie, she is quite likeable. I wasn't a huge fan of her story overall, but just the actress who plays her and the character herself, she's a good final girl. She is definitely one you root for and you want to survive till the end. And guys, the cruise ship scenes, for the most part, they do work. I thought it was a great setting to do, especially since the last 7 movies have been on land, they've been on Camp Crystal Lake. It was just something different to do with the movie, and I enjoyed that about it. Another positive, guys, would be the scenes in New York City. So as I said, they are great scenes, and there's a lot of action that happens in those scenes also. You know, we get a car chase in New York City. We get Jason chasing Rennie and Sean through a subway in New York City. That's pretty great to see, especially when you see all these New Yorkers just being like, who the hell is this big towering guy with a hockey mask? Saying all that though, that's pretty much where my positives end. As I said already, there are a lot of negatives with this movie. There's a lot of things I did not enjoy about it, especially on my rewatch. To be honest with you, there are a lot of things that I actually kind of forgot about this movie, especially the weird aspects of it. So one in particular, and probably my most hated part of this entire movie, was the flashbacks or the kind of visions to Jason as a child. I'm not sure what the filmmakers were thinking when they were doing that, but it just made absolutely no sense. I know in the last movie I had a kind of telekinesis Carrie style character, but this for me was just going over the top. Even saying that, even if, you know, that's in there, you also had Jason as a child, and he looked nothing like the Jason as a child that we've seen in the last few movies. He's very much, you know, he has hair on his head, he's not deformed, he's a regular kind of little child who's drowning in a lake throughout the movie. I wasn't a huge fan of that. I also wasn't a fan that Rennie, for some reason, were having these visions that were really never explained. You could say, you know, it was post-traumatic stress, but at the same time, it's a little overboard to what she would get. And even if you could forgive that, the way it was done, the way it was pulled off was absolutely ridiculous. I hated it in the movie. There's one scene in particular where Jason comes out of a mirror, and it's pretty much a portal thing that he comes out about. It just looked absolutely stupid. If I had been in the cinema at the time, I would have probably walked out and been like, this is not a proper Jason movie. As well as that, and I'd probably get hate for this, I was not a fan of Jason Voorhees in this movie. The look of him himself, you know, he was slimy throughout the entire movie, which kind of made no sense since he was on a boat for most of it. He was a bit too big for me. I've never been a huge Kane Hodder fan, and in this one he's a little bit too big for Jason. But one thing in particular that actually really annoyed me throughout the movie as I watched it is the teleporting. So in the Friday the 13th game, Jason can teleport around a map, and I know at the time when it came out, a lot of people were angry about it, but now looking at Friday the 13th Part 8, I can kind of see why it's there. A lot of the things that Jason does in this movie don't make any sense. He teleports all over the map. For one, nobody sees him on the ship throughout the entire run unless he wants them to see him. But also when he is chasing somebody, or, you know, once he's after someone, he can just teleport in front of them or behind them with no logical sense. There's one scene in particular where Kelly Hu she's pretty much getting chased down a hallway on the ship, and she runs onto a dance floor. Now she is looking at Jason in the face, and even though she's doing that, he's teleporting from different parts of the dance floor. It made no sense. It completely just took me out of the movie, because it meant no matter what these kids do, they couldn't really fight back or get away from Jason. That is fine in Camp Crystal Lake because Jason is pretty much in the woods. You don't know which part of the woods he's in. He may go under the water, but with this he's pretty much in one singular room, and she's freaking out. She doesn't know where he's going to be, even though she can see him in front of her. That for me, guys, is a huge negative about the movie. Again, it took me out of the movie. With that, paired with young Jason, who was just coming out of portals every 2 minutes, wasn't a fan of it at all. Well as that, the kills in this movie were severely cut down. There are some great scenes, you just don't really see the kills. One in particular, there's a guy, he's in a sauna, and Jason pretty much takes a sauna rock and puts it through his chest. I would have really liked to see that scene. I thought it'd be a really great special effect, but unfortunately it was cut out. For me, there are no notable deaths in this movie except for that boxing scene where Jason pretty much punches one of the characters' heads clean off his shoulders. We also have other characters in this movie, so I didn't mind the teachers in this movie. Again, their deaths weren't hugely great, but it was fun to see a bunch of adults with the teenagers running throughout the city. Aspect I did really enjoy about this one was a lot of the teenagers actually banded together. Now again, I did get the feeling that they were kind of copying a little bit from Nightmare on Elm Street. I felt like the Dream Warriors coming together to take down Freddy, only this time they're taking down Jason. But unfortunately, as quick as that started, everyone split up and started getting killed off one by one. Speaking of when the final girl is finally by herself, that last scene in the movie, I absolutely hated. Especially looking at even Jason's final form. The makeup on that looked absolutely stupid. To me, he looked like the alien in Alien Resurrection, the Queen's baby, I suppose. The final fight between Jason, it wasn't something to talk about, especially from the last movie when we had that great kind of standoff between the last two characters. With this one, not a lot happens pretty much. They don't even make anything happen. We just get a load of sludge come down into the tunnels as they're trying to escape. Jason screams and for some reason turns back into his former self when he was a little boy. Again, he doesn't really look like the Jason we all know and love when he was a kid. So I get what they were doing, that they were trying to bookend the whole series, and go back to when he was a little boy, but they just did not pull it off right at all. But guys, there is a lot of things wrong with this movie. I wasn't a big fan of it. I probably won't see it again for quite some time, which is unfortunate because I did love it when I was a kid. For me, there was just a lot of missed opportunities with this movie. I do wish they didn't call it Jason Takes Manhattan. If they called it Jason Goes to Sea or something like that, then at least then when you're watching it, you wouldn't be expecting the entire time for them to get to Manhattan. That's what I kind of felt. You're constantly just waiting till they get to New York City, whereas a lot of the stuff that happen on the ship are quite fun, but you're just not interested because it's nothing to do with the title. As well as that, just the look and the actions of Jason didn't work in this movie for me at all. He was one of the worst parts I actually thought about the movie, which you should never think for a Friday the 13th movie. Again, it does have good bits, it's not the worst in the series by any means, but just looking at it this time, I was really disappointed with the amount of faults I saw. So guys, would I recommend this movie? If you're watching the whole series, then yes, check it out. Definitely don't make it one of the first watches with Friday the 13th movies. It's unfortunate that this is kind of where the series started to struggle a lot, and it kind of ended the series for a while. But again, look, if you're watching the whole franchise, give it a shot. There's no harm in seeing it. So guys, that is my review of Friday the 13th Part 8. Give it a watch if you can. It's definitely a batshit crazy movie, but as I said already, it does definitely get better once they get to New York City. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of the New York City in it, but for the most part, it's a fun flick that you can throw on if you've nothing else to watch. If you like this review, guys, and you want to even defend this movie, let comments below letting me know why you liked the movie yourself. If you didn't, let me comment as well. Don't forget, guys, to subscribe, pop on your notifications so you don't miss another video, and until next time, Heidi ho.